Thank you for joining For Our Special Kids, where we openly and honestly discuss the magic and the mess of raising a child with special needs. We are thrilled to have you here and hope this time provides you with some wonder and wisdom. I'm your host, Jennifer Lansing. Let's get started. Maureen Burford joins us again for part 3 of our deep dive into holistic education through chakra balancing and development. I encourage you to listen to part 1, which posted on June 5th, and then part 2, which posted on June 11th, because it gives you a lot of context. And today's episode is all about tangible ways for us to work with the framework that Ellen Tadd writes about in her book, A Framework for Wise Education. Maureen works with me on a strategy for Teal and how to incorporate counting and numbers into her world in a more inspiring way. We talk about the importance of the root or base chakra and how to better develop that in children with mobility challenges. And she perfectly highlights how each solution is child dependent when we talk about autism. Maureen doesn't have a standard off-the-shelf answer for me when I give her an example of a stimming, extremely focused child with autism who we are trying to get to the lunch table. And in her lack of response and in her inability to provide an off-the-shelf one-and-done answer, she beautifully demonstrates the power of why an individualized approach is so important and how that individualized approach really speaks directly to the child themselves and what inspires them and opens up their 7th chakra. So I loved our conversation. I hope you do as well. As always, let me know what you think. Welcome back, Maureen. I'm with Maureen Burford, and I'm going to say that correctly, Burford. I've been kind of saying it wrong, you guys. So I am with Maureen again, and I'm going to do a quick read of the book that Ellen Tadd wrote. It's page 9 where there's a highlight here. I'm going to read 2 sections to you, and then that's just going to kick us off into our conversation. Okay, Maureen? Here we go. So Ellen writes, in a private session with my student, it became clear to me that what is needed in education is not just more creativity, but an integrated approach focused on the development of the whole child. I believe that the chakra system provides the structure necessary to advance this concept. Then she writes, inspired by her interest, I was further encouraged by articles that suggest that educational innovation often comes from outside the traditional academic study of education. With that in mind, I began to consider how to implement my understanding of the chakra system as a practical, holistic methodology for creating a framework for wise education. And I feel like that is just a really quick summary of like what she then talks about. And it kind of puts meaning into the chakra discussion we had initially. So what I wanted to start with is an example that right after my recording with you, Maureen, I went in and I volunteered at school. And we were doing some art projects and it was really fun. And I noticed that this little girl, and I won't use her name, she had this very, very sad look on her face. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, so-and-so told me that my art project was dumb or something. She used like a kind of a mean word. And I said, oh. And all of a sudden, the Tadd technique came flying into my head. And I said, where do you feel that? And she just sat there. And I know she was kind of like, And I said, does your tummy kind of hurt? And she's like, yeah. And I said, okay, what I want you to do. And I literally was like, okay, I want you to think about taking that feeling. And I said, can I touch your head? And she's like, yeah. And I tapped her little, wise owl, the wise owl that I've been using. I said, the little wise one, this third eye right here. I said, I want you to bring that up into that little spot, right? Bring that feeling up and just bring it up. And she literally sat there and just did it. And I said, now I want you to tell me, how does that feel? Like, how do those words feel to you now? And she was like, doesn't feel as bad. No, she's 6. And I said, yeah, you're kind of seeing it differently, huh? Like, you know that your artwork is beautiful, don't you? And she was like, yeah. And I said, okay, good. And then she just like went off. I had to share that with you.
That's wonderful. And not surprising, but sometimes it's surprising to us the first time we realize it could be that simple that we could shift our focus from being
Yeah.
in the belly where it was like a little kick in the gut when that
Yes.
person teased her. And
Yes.
when we get that kick, we tend to drop into our gut and then we're perceiving focused in the belly and everything looks a certain way. But lifting her focus up to her wise view was night and day. I could feel her instantly calmer and a little surprised herself. Huh, not so bad. Yeah, my artwork's beautiful and
Yeah.
I'm moving on.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
she is a pretty sensitive child.
Yeah.
She is very, she's emotional. Her mom has given her freedom to express her emotions, and her mom and dad, I know her mom more than her dad. So it was just hilarious. I was like, I've got to make sure that I
I'm
tell her.
glad you told me that one. I know it can feel, I have some practitioners from our training who start practicing it even with little kids, 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds too, with a little more facilitation. And the child will have a complete turnaround in how they want to proceed. And one teacher wrote in her journal, I was pinching myself. Did this actually happen? This
Yeah.
child is so often and frequently discombobulated and upset and has a hard time giving over to what might work well for the whole group and not just what they want. And it was night and day.
Mm-hmm.
A little 2-year-old getting up in his wise view and saying, "Oh, we'll call him Johnny wants to play where there's two robbers, and I think we could play the game his way first." That's and solved, right? As
Right.
opposed to being in a power struggle with a buddy. So yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
I
I
know it
love it
was
that you went right into the field and had an experience, Jen.
it was so funny. I mean, it wasn't funny, it was profound. I mean, and
Yeah.
I think that's why it's so important for us to talk about these tangible things, because it doesn't have to be hard. You have
No,
to
I
have some words, you have to have some, words and guidance, but it doesn't have to be hard. Go ahead.
doesn't have to be hard. I was talking with Ellen the other day, and she was explaining to me that really the chakra system is quite complicated, and she studied it for 10 years to distill into simple terms that you and I could work with to help the chakras function well. And that process is like, when you get to know something really, really well that's complicated, and then you can help a layperson like me get it, whether it's science or whether it's you know, the structure of a great painting, if it gets distilled into terms that I can understand, that's what she's done for us with the chakra system. So, yes, in a training program, the first step, I mean, you can read her book, but I really advocate for doing some study because it's like learning to play an instrument from reading a book about it. It's so great to have some coaching on your technique, on how you're using these tools yourself. But yes, breaking down in each of the 7 framework categories that are linked to the function of the chakras, we can learn specific tools and strategies and begin to notice behaviors that indicate that center is functioning well, or it might need a little adjustment. It might be getting dominant, it might be getting diminished. A really concrete example is if you've ever been to a party where the kids are running a little wild and the
No,
parents don't
no,
really
I've never been
really
there.
want to be paying attention. They want to be
Uh-huh.
focused on their own conversations, and
Yes.
this sort of excited dynamic is getting a little dangerous. And what's needed is to bring the kids back to some focus so that their enthusiasm doesn't run away with them and get them into trouble.
So how
So
would you do that? How in that situation with a big group of kids, how would
yeah.
you, let's say they're first to fourth graders, right? What would you do?
Yeah, if the energy starts rising like that,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing would be to think of a very fun and focusing activity, like as simple as follow the leader. And in some classrooms, there's this simple, clap and response technique,
Right. I've seen that.
And everybody claps back. Oh, that snapped my attention together. Now I'm going to hold their attention for a while, and I'm going to hold their attention long enough that their focus center starts to open. And as soon as that happens, it helps right size the crown chakra. So then we're kind of calming it down and definitely want to keep that enthusiasm, but we want to keep it integrated with focus. So a great word for the practical side of this approach is integration.
Mm-hmm.
We want to help the chakras work together. And, a child can be very focused, but they need their base chakra, which is at the bottom of the spine, and it's the center of discipline and skill building and good habits and order. They need that base chakra to do what they see is wise to do. So all of the centers working together. And yes, it takes some, as I was saying to you, I think in our last conversation, it takes some practice ourselves. We have to stretch a little bit ourselves and spend a time saying, oh, how does this work for me?
Mm-hmm.
Do I tend to get kind of heady and feel a little uninspired when I'm working with my children? Or do I get overly excited and they all get excited too? If I'm working with a special needs child, what are my priorities in terms of keeping my own self clear and well? Because there's a lot of decisions to make.
Yes.
A lot of guiding. And sometimes for any parent, for a parent with a special needs child, there's some questions that come up that aren't easily answered. How do we be with that? So practical tools and strategies that strengthen each center.
It's interesting. I've been so much more aware since our conversations and reading the book. As you were chatting, I sometimes have a tendency to not have as much fun in play with my daughter. It's so weird, right? Like I've actually heard that from a lot of parents. Like I don't really always love playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that when I am far more balanced and just all my energy centers are open and spinning at a somewhat congruent level,
Mm-hmm.
I'm more present with just following her lead. And sometimes I feel like I have to be the leader when, as a parent, I'm sitting down to play with her. And in the end, if I'm really working with my second chakra, it would be balance. And sometimes I lead and sometimes I follow. But with Teal and our children, I think it's so important for us to follow them. Follow them. Let them be the leader of what they want to do. Because so often we're making all of their decisions.
Right. Isn't that an important point?
Mm.
And in a play setting, children tend to work out their issues. It's interesting when you're doing dual play with a child and you're letting them take the lead. And if you're in your third eyes to do play therapy with kids as a practice, there would be every now and then where I would introduce something into the play that was happening that would have the child go, huh. But so often taking the lead from them and offering them back something that came from my own wisdom in response. So yes, it's a beautiful example of also really empowering the child. Oh, I'm playing with you and you're leading.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what are we going to do? I don't know. Oh, really? That's what's happening. And this kind of real dialogue that can spur out of that is pretty amazing.
Right. So you mentioned earlier the base chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would call the root chakra, but the base chakra. So just so people are, if they haven't read the book, Ellen talks about, and I'm just going to say you, because you're living this. It talks about, discipline and repetition, and development of that is really important. However, you guys also chat about how it is the last one to fully kind of develop. I don't know if those are the right words, but that a child is born into this world with a very open crown, very much following their intuition, very much following their own beautiful presence in this world. And then as they get more exposure to other people, things start shifting. But that the base chakra is extremely important, like you said, in discipline, education, learning, following rules, things, safety, security, all of that stuff. So my question is, if the base chakra is so important to everything else, what can we do to help that? I mean, can you push it? Can you help it open quicker? I know that sounds horrible, but when do you start working the discipline in to help foster the development of that base chakra? There's the question.
Good question. Good question. And yes, to say that a child comes in, the crown chakra is the center of feeling trust in the learning process, feeling kind of inspired and devoted, and a feeling of connection. So with the baby having that open crown, it so facilitates their bonding with their parent, their feeling open to new learning experiences. Their focus is gradually developing. Their throat chakra, which expresses themselves, is gradually opening, and they're vocalizing or using their hands if they can't vocalize because of some challenge with hearing. They are, their hearts are open and radiating, but these lower chakras, they're feeling in their belly, of course, but the identity chakra, she calls it, you might know it as the sacral chakra, which is in the lower abdomen, which has to do with expressing ourselves in the world, being ourselves with other people. That's developing slowly as children are expressing preferences, as they're saying, oh, I want to learn more about China, or I want to learn more about trucks, or I want to draw, or I want to be playing soccer. So we express our individuality, which is evolving and growing in this identity chakra of balance, the back and forth, as you were talking about earlier. But the base is slowly also developing. So what's good timing for developing the variety of skills you want children to have? And Ellen divides the base chakra into areas to make it a little easier to digest. So skills that have to do with taking care of our physical health. Skills that have to do with taking care of our cognitive development, skills that have to do with our emotional well-being.
And that's all within the base.
That's all within the base.
Okay.
Building the skills is
building
the
the skills.
doing of it, right?
Okay.
And it's strengthening other chakras as you do. But you're working on the disciplines of those things, the repetition in the base. So the answer to that question, I think, is there's a unique pace of learning for every person.
Yeah.
Because, well, I remember that my sister was a very deep considerer. She was the youngest in the family. There was a lot to take in with two older siblings and two parents. Everybody played instruments. It was a very busy household. And she was listening and learning, and her developmental pace was just a little bit slower than what mine had been early on in the early years. My mother bought her the story, Leo the Late Bloomer.
I have that book for Teal.
Yeah. And Leo bloomed in his own time. And my sister loved that book. And of course, now she's a PhD scientist, blowing people's minds with her creative approach to teaching and genomics. So the pacing of one's own base chakra can be unique. And yet there are certain things we want to help kids do in the early years, right? And then as they become toddlers. And as Ellen says, if a toddler hits somebody to see what will happen, that's one thing. If a teenager does it, that's another thing. So they're learning appropriate behavior. They're learning self-control according to their capacity to do it at the time. And for us as parents, what's really helpful is to be in our own wise view, in our third eye, to observe that and say, okay, how is this going? Where are some skills that my child loves learning? Where are some ones I know they need to learn, but that are harder? How can I inspire them to work hard in this area? Because children don't always love to learn everything they need to learn. We know they don't.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you a great example. Teal. So I know that she adores art. I know that she adores baby dolls. She adores the kitchen. She adores people in general. She's an extremely social child. Very. However, that shocks none of you that are listening that my child is social. Okay. But she isn't a fan of math. She just does not like numbers. She doesn't like counting. I mean, and and I know there are parents out there that can relate to this. It's extremely hard to measure her learning.
Mm-hmm.
She isn't talking yet in words that I can completely understand. She isn't writing yet. That OT, the fine motor control is really tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And even though she's really great at finding words and putting sentences together on her talking board, she's just not a fan of numbers and math. Now, I can say she'll get there because she will, but I'd love to know from your perspective, okay, knowing what she loves and knowing that we are not hardworking around numbers, what is a strategy that could be utilized? Go.
to help Teal grab onto something that she's a little more averse to. And when you tune into that, when you were watching her, does it feel like an aversion a bit, or does it feel like it's just not quite time? A little resistance from her. I can certainly relate to that.
So this is what I would say, and this has been her pattern. When we would try to go through like the ABCs, she would kind of roll her eyes at me. When we would do like colors, she would roll her like, ugh. And my mom actually caught it once. She's like, did Teal just roll her eyes? I'm like, yep, at 18 months, or 16 months, she was rolling her eyes at me. So part of me intuitively, when I just sit here with it, says, it's not her purpose. Like the numbers will come just like the colors came and the ABCs came. But intuitively, I sit here and go, well, this isn't her first rodeo. And she's literally like, really, mom, numbers? We're going to do numbers? Like, whatever. Like, that's the feeling that I get.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that she doesn't know that they're important. I just feel like she's above it. That sounds so horrible. Please don't report me to any school systems or whatever. We do numbers. I feel like she's just hovers above it a little bit. So, and again, I don't know, maybe, okay, I'm going to stop talking. I answered your question.
It's a really good question. In fact, a parent in our class that's meeting this summer asked a very similar question.
Okay.
Where is it that I should take the lead a bit more with my child and encourage them into something that they're resisting? Mm-hmm. And where is it really important to follow their lead and just leave it alone?
Okay.
How do we know? Okay. So I would say the first thing I would say for you is to feel the difference about what you think you should do from your belly and then from your third eye. Okay.
Right.
So let's do the TAD technique. And any parent who has a similar challenge going on with what's the right, could ask the same question about your own child. What is developmentally appropriate right now? What should I do? So focus in your belly, Jen.
Oh, it's so weird. I got all heavy in my throat chakra. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that can sometimes be a feeling of, I want to get it right. I'm afraid I might make a mistake.
Yes. Well, with this, it's true. Like, especially education. I mean, hello.
It's important.
Yeah, it's very important. Okay. Here we go.
Good. So you focus in your belly and look at the situation with Teal and math from your belly, keeping your focus there.
Trying really hard. Okay.
And just, you can say it out loud if you want as you experience it.
Yeah, I want to say I'm like kind of nauseous.
Feels churning up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely nauseous and weighted, very heavy in my tummy, in my gut.
So kind of hard to navigate from that feeling.
Totally.
Okay. So we're just going to put some acceptance there. There's some charge around around this issue. So we're just going to let you take a moment and just accept that it's hard to know what to do from your solar plexus. There's some feeling.
Oh, and now it's all going into my heart. The tummy relaxed and then it went up into my heart of like,
am I doing the loving thing? What's yeah.
Oh, this is so good.
It's so good. It's really good.
Okay.
So then a little tenderness in the heart area, just some acceptance too that, well, we love our children so much, and sometimes it's hard to know what's really best for them. And
Yeah.
in that consternation, we can feel also some grief and hurt for them, with them.
And that's a huge word for parents with special needs. Grief.
Yes, grief.
Huge.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
can, I was tuning, meditating this morning and feeling yes.
Yeah.
So then accepting that and then letting your focus continue up through your throat, where I know you were feeling a little tight before around, am I doing what's best? Am I enough? And now bring it up into the middle of your forehead. And you can close your eyes or keep your eyes open and stare at a point, but really feel that focus in the middle of your forehead and hold it there. And from there, you're asking the same question. What's appropriate? What's the next step for Teal with her math?
I just saw her counting steps while we were walking,
Beautiful.
like going up
Simple.
steps, like on like every step, one step, two step, three step.
Sing song along with something that she's already doing that is integrated, right? Counting steps.
Yeah. And she's
Beautiful.
really excited about walking the stairs. She's just learning, right? So she's just learning how to get up the stairs. And I even see like putting one rock on one step and putting two rocks on two steps and
Oh
three
my
rocks on
goodness.
three steps. Like that's just what I saw. Oh, I love you.
Okay. Well, that's an educational innovation right there, Jen. And it comes from, oh, it makes me teary because it comes from your love for her,
Yeah.
your desire to really help her navigate, to empower her, to not have her avoid something that could be important for her to learn, but to do it in a way that's most helpful. She's already inspired when she's working on the stairs, so she's more open to counting at that point.
Mhm.
Bing, bing, bing. That would Ellen would say, and we've been taught in her classes to feel the bing and the thud, it's like bing.
Bing.
It has vibration.
It
So,
does.
it
Yeah.
can be when you're listening to this conversation, if you, as I hope you are, it can be surprising sometimes to feel that from the third eye there's this ease.
Yeah, there was not even a question. The answer just appeared.
Yes. And and in that ease, the answer might be something very clear appears, like just happened for Jen. It might be, oh, I need more information. I need to go do a little more research here and there, and then I'm going to look again. It might be, oh, apples or oranges. I could do this or I could do this, and they'd both be growthful. So we can get different information depending on the question. That was great.
That was so empowering. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So empowering. And I'm just chuckling because it's so, like I said, it was just so easy. I just literally saw her walking up the stairs and looking at stones and counting stones. It's so simple.
And
Yeah.
to unpack that a little bit too
Mhm.
further, there are a couple of things that make sense about what Jen saw. One is, as I said, she's found Teal at a time when she's already inspired about a new discovery. So it's easier when children's crown is open, when they're inspired, to introduce them to something new. It, she integrated the counting with an activity that Teal really wants to work on. So
Yeah.
there's some base in there already. There's some, I want to do this, and some determination and grit from her. So integrating counting with that is only going to add to that feeling of repetition and practice with counting. So yes, it's a great idea. And another point I want to make here is that sometimes when we're unsure of what to do, we want to turn to an expert and we want to ask someone else. And, sometimes we really should. And it can be so helpful to do this piece of homework ourselves. If I let my intellect get calm and I'm in my third eye, so my brain is working with my focus, my feelings are lined up. What do I see? What do I need to know? What do I want to ask? And that's a beautiful question we can ask throughout the day. given what is, what's my part to play here?
So yes, I do believe all of our answers are within us. I mean, I believe the God, the universe is within us. And so every answer that we need is actually in us. But because you were an expert in this situation, you helped me move through the emotion.
Mm,
And I know me, I may have felt those emotions and been like, oh, no, I'm not ready. See, you're not going to get an answer if you feel these emotions. Right.
mm,
And
mm,
instead of just, because I know that's a tendency for a lot of people, like, whoa, if I'm
mm,
emotional, I can't make that decision. And the TAD technique is literally saying, no, embrace the emotion. And when you said
mhm,
accept that and put some acceptance around it, I was like, oh, it's okay to feel those emotions
mhm,
because I love her so much. I think
mhm,
so many times we fight these emotions that we're feeling
mm.
because it's a sign of weakness, or it's a sign that you're too involved, or it's a sign that, you care too much. It's like, no,
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing to feel it, to accept it, and then to move up. I just love it. So thank you.
you're welcome. I do. I mean, I would say that what you said, what you started by saying, that we have this knowledge, we have wisdom within us. And yes, sometimes we have to go outside with our wisdom and find the next piece of knowledge that we need. It's, we don't have all the knowledge inside of us. It's sort of, we're part of this whole of life. But that wisdom factor that can guide us in the next wise step, that we have and we can really cultivate. And it doesn't negate our feelings. Sometimes our feelings take over. Sometimes we fall into the solar plexus and we're really feeling. But and that key word acceptance is one that we practice a lot in the course. So if we're accepting what's happening, if we're accepting our own feelings, our own attachment, our own grief, our own fatigue, whatever it might be.
I laugh because fatigue's another good one. Good job, Maureen. You're pulling on grief and fatigue. Those are like the two big, lovely emotions that we all are living in. Yeah.
Of course. And so
Yeah.
then there is just this beautiful and simple way to access
Right.
that wise sage within us and help our children do the same.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I would love to ask you about how the feet, I'm going to transition here to something different. The feet are connected to the base chakra because I put a note in when I was reading. What about the children that don't walk?
Right.
Right? They're in a wheelchair and they've never experienced walking, the sensation, or being on their feet. So, talk with me a little bit about what we can do as parents in that situation to help develop that base chakra.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I was thinking about it this morning and it made me want to call Ellen and ask her for her insights on that as well. But, you know, yes, walking would be a way to be developing the base physical, you know, the skill of balancing and walking would develop the base.
Mm-hmm.
But so would the skill of learning to navigate your wheelchair or use other means of moving yourself through space and time.
Okay.
So the base chakra will develop as children develop skills across this array of who they are, their physical well-being. And that's, yes, walking, but for some kids, it's not walking. For
Mm-hmm.
some kids, it may be physical therapy so that their legs and muscles stay, healthy, even while they're not putting weight on them.
Mm-hmm.
It may be other things that bring children into their body. And if they don't have sensation in their feet, but their legs are still mobile, any number of things that a physical therapist might do. The children are also developing their base in addition to physically, which includes how they sleep, how they eat. All of that is strengthening the base chakra.
Okay.
So not being able to walk is certainly a unique, it's not unique, but it's you're going to look at other ways that the base is strengthening besides moving on legs.
Mm-hmm.
And then into the territory of cognitive development and emotional well-being. So the part of the base that deals with our inner well-being is really linked to helping children develop their focus, to their ability to do that, feel positive, affirmative attitudes,
Okay.
and have their crown feel inspired. And that so helps their inner life be positive. The habits that lead to a focused third eye, a healthy crown, an open throat chakra, those are strengthening the base, the habits that build the inner life.
Okay. As you were chatting, I flashed back to some training that I've done with Sylvia Shordyke, and she's been on the show a few times talking about neuro movement and neuroplasticity and how we can, through better understanding of our bones, actually create more neural connections. And so as you were talking, I realized that just because the sensation isn't there doesn't necessarily mean that the brain is not aware. And so even just taking, I used to do this with Teal a lot, just taking her toes and just putting them in between my fingers. So one toe in between a thumb and a pointer finger, and just rotating it, and then moving to the next toe and rotating it, and then doing that for all the toes. And then even if you do this with your hand, because like I'm doing it on my hand right now because I'm not touching my feet, but there's all these little bones that connect to, right, the metatarsals and all that, but you can put your fingers in between those bones and just help them feel like, whoa, help the brain understand that there are bones down there. And it hit me as you were talking. I'm like, oh, well, just because you're not putting weight on it doesn't mean that you don't have those extremities that you can work with.
That's right.
So.
That's right. I think when a friend was recovering from a broken leg, one doctor or therapist had recommended to her to imagine that she was using that leg, and in the imagining of it, the muscles would be firing.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, our bodies are they're energetic, of course. So that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. And even just, I could see reading stories about, or even just talking about running, just because you're in a wheelchair, you can still go fast. And let's imagine if you had if you were using those legs. Now, I might get hate mail for talking about this. I don't know. People might email me and be like, Jen, that was so horrible. But I'm like, we talked with Teal about movement and all of that. I don't know.
It's interesting, I mean, and I would say for parents to take it in the way that it makes sense for their particular child.
Sure.
But what feels good is moving through space. And I have watched children in wheelchairs dancing on stage.
Yeah.
And this feeling of flying, or watching all the amazing new ways that children can experience a feeling of athleticism, whether they can use their legs or not. So this feeling
water's a great one.
Yes, water and tactile experiences that, building strength in the upper body. Every child's circumstance is unique, and in special needs, the needs are very unique as well. So we want to be really attuned to what's appropriate for us, our family, our child. But the base chakra can be developing with or without the legs being able to be mobile.
Absolutely. And I hope that wasn't, I hope that I wasn't assuming that it wouldn't develop. It was more of saying, how can we best work with that? So,
I thought it's a great question. It's a really good question. We all have strengths and weaknesses and limits and not limits, but sometimes they're more for some children. And in those cases, and I'm thinking of a few children that I worked with, one who had, I want to say, is it trisomy 13? She had an extra set of chromosomes. And, often children in that, with that diagnosis don't live terribly long. She lived to be 11. And in that time, I definitely saw the challenge of her limits for her and the people who loved her. Okay, so there was grief, but there was so much love and joy as well. And I watched her developing over those 11 years, developing strengths that were definitely strengthening her base.
Right.
I I feel like her love of music and sound and certain kinds of light and touch, and it, her, as much as it was possible within the limits of her body, she was developing her chakras.
So let's transition to autism.
Mm.
Do you have any examples? I know I've really been hitting on this base chakra, but I took a lot of notes on the base chakra. Like the repetition and the discipline you see an autist who is perhaps doing the same thing over and over and over. Would their base chakra be not diminished, but overly, what's the word that you guys use? Overly open.
A little dominant?
Dominant, thank you. Like,
yeah.
What's the word? Yeah. So would that child's base chakra be dominant?
That's a good question. I'd have to think of a specific child in a specific example because it could be quite unique. I'm thinking of stimming behaviors that are very repetitive, and I'm thinking of being tracked onto something that the child doesn't want to stop. I've seen that behavior with
extreme focus.
Right, extreme focus in it, and I don't want to break away. And the interesting question is, just as you were asking before with Teal, what's really healthy and appropriate? What should I be helping to evolve? And how, if it needs to evolve, how will I go about that? And who will maybe be needed to help? So yeah, I think it's such a good question. I'm not sure I have a full answer to, but one that I'd like to look into more. I mean, what would I do if I were working with that child? And I think for me, I would want to be helping that child be able to shift their focus.
Right.
And release a behavior that was repetitive, but not necessarily productive, so that they could begin to expand where they are building skills. I'd want to know the particular child. How would I help them move that way? And I'll
give you an example. How about we do that? I'll make up a child. Okay. So, because I know you'll immediately like, boom, I've got it. So let's say exactly stimming, acting like they just can't even hear, right? They're so focused on perhaps this puzzle. Let's say they're just only on the puzzle. And it's time to transition to eating. So it's time to now move over to the table. I'm thinking of a school setting, right? It's now time for us to move over and get our lunchbox out and start eating. And we know that this child loves math and numbers, let's say, right? So okay, so this child is very into numbers, but can only focus on this puzzle. So does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
That's a good situation.
Okay, good.
Okay. So if I had more experience with working with children with autism, I might have a more particular answer to this question.
Okay.
But my first answer would be to say, I wouldn't want to generalize, because I would want to know, is this a behavior that is happening because the situation's relatively new and the child is feeling overwhelmed and therefore the comfort is the puzzle? And if that's the case, I might handle it a little bit differently than if it was a child who is in a routine of behavior that really that it's time to help evolve. And then how would I manage to do that? What, like you did with the stones on the steps, doing something the child already loves, could I introduce a puzzle factor at the table? Is there something that might draw their attention and inspire them to move towards lunch? Is there a sound cue that helps? Is there a warning of putting music on that helps their body get it, that we're going to be transitioning soon? There could be a number of ways, and I don't have the expertise in teaching many students on the spectrum, but I also think sometimes we get boxed into solutions because we aren't in our third eye. And, I probably, if I were the teacher, I'd want to talk to the parents too, right? We want to be on the same team. What's working? What's not working? How can we help? Suppose their name is Karen. How can we help Karen begin to have an easier time transitioning from the things that Karen loves to do and has a hard time releasing to things that we know she also needs to do?
I love that concept of perhaps an auditory shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if they're so focused and they're not hearing, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could see that where they just wouldn't even be hearing you say, okay, Karen, it's time for us to move into lunch,
Right.
right? But saying, okay, Karen, we're going to put on music. And every time we hear this music, it means that we're transitioning to lunch. And it
Right.
might not happen day one, two, three, four, right? It might take a week. What would your thought also be about, okay, maybe we bring lunch to them?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I mean, I don't know. I'm definitely not an expert in
Right.
any
And
of this.
why wouldn't that be an okay solution? I mean, in other words, there could be any number of creative solutions that help the child expand their behavior, their awareness, their choices, their music has a special place in my heart. And I've seen
Mhm.
some amazing work with music therapy and autism, which is probably why that musical suggestion came into my mind.
Mhm.
Um, Awakening other senses that aren't being used as much in the puzzle game that sparked some curiosity. With a child who has what's called obsessive compulsive
Right.
disorder,
Yeah.
there's this tendency to focus on repetitive activities, which are very base chakra, but the base is not integrated with the third eye
Mhm.
or with inspiration. So it's kind of running on its own, and repetitive behaviors are happening. Why that might be happening, there could be a physical component, there can be lots of things going on. But one of the things we definitely want to do is help capture that child's focus and move it in and open it,
Mhm.
which will immediately begin to temper the base. It's not so easy to do, right?
Right.
It's like okay, what really might make that child who loves the puzzle, what could really help their focus shift?
And it's child dependent.
What will be the magic thing? It's child
Right.
dependent.
And that's what you've said. And that's what we've talked about this whole time is you can't take education and just provide the same education in the same way to every child because children are different and we're all different. So for me to come up with a solution for Teal, because boom, I know Teal, I immediately could apply my third eye and figure it out.
Mm.
That would happen to a teacher in that situation, right? So I actually hear you saying, it's a really good example of you saying, I actually can't really come up with a concrete example because every child is different. And so I love that because the teacher in the situation, if they're empowered to say, okay, hold on, I'm not going to force the situation right now because we all know that that doesn't work.
Right.
Two, I'm going to feel this in my body. I'm going to take 30 seconds. It doesn't have to take, oh, I need a 5-minute break to go figure this out. It's like, okay, I'm going to feel this in my body. I'm going to accept the feelings. I'm going to move this up. I'm going to keep breathing while I do it. I'm not going to get in too much into my head, but I'm going to bring it into my third eye.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, there's the answer. And I actually, without you knowing it, you gave us the exact example of like, I can't really give you a full response to that
Yeah.
because
Well,
every
good.
individual is different.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we're in our third eye, we're better able to just know the next step.
Right.
Just the next step.
Yeah. The next best thing.
And sometimes the next step doesn't work super well, but it's moving you to the next step. It's just this feeling of movement towards a solution.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I guess I want to, at this point, just impress on listeners that this is kind of a missing piece in our understanding of human development. It doesn't negate what we know about the brain or sociology or psychology, and it integrates. And what's missing is understanding that children, when they're focused in their third eye, are understanding they're understanding the ecosystem, they're understanding their part in the whole. They're understanding the consequences of what they do. And it's much easier for us to help them learn anything when they're focused that way and when they're inspired or sparked by something that gets their curiosity going. So, like you said, it doesn't really work to push or hammer or make something happen, but how can we be like the Pied Piper? Yeah, it's still going to be work, but how can we feel like we're moving in a path that's helping that child unfold into their own focus, their own curiosity, their own love of learning, what inspires them to learn, to learn next, And when there's some resistance to learning something we know they need, how can we find ways to inspire them to do so? It's a little bit like the Jedi,
Right. Well, it is.
I,
It's a superpower that we all have.
yes, it's a superpower that we all have and that kids have.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're
This
welcome.
has just been really third eye opening.
Third eye opening. I know. Sometimes I hope I don't overemphasize the third eye, because every chakra is important, of course, and all the love that parents are giving their children.
Right.
That's a huge basis for growth and feeling safe in the world. All of these centers, but the third eye and the base chakra together provide kind of an architecture that helps all the other chakras work well.
Oh, such a fantastic conversation. I am going to be enrolling in your fall class because my summer is a little crazy, but I do want to just highlight the fact that all of this is covered in detail with a lot of hand on hand and peer to peer and mentor to mentee conversations, et cetera, and learning in your courses. So I'm very excited to enroll in your fall course because I think it'll just, like I mentioned earlier when we were talking, I think it's just another layer of understanding. The more tools I have in my toolbox, the better parent I am. And truthfully, the better human being I am. So this is just another wonderful tool that I'm looking forward to learning more about and really implementing, because it's really powerful.
Yeah, I'm so delighted that you'll be joining us.
Me
And
too.
yes, we do need time and help. It's okay to give ourselves that time to learn something new. That's really worth learning, and take the time it takes to figure it out in a deeper way.
Thank
So
you so much.
yay!
Yay! Go us.
Go
Thanks.
us. Go Jen
Yeah, thanks,
and
Maureen,
Teal.
so much.
You're
Yeah, and I'm gonna
welcome. What
go
a
find
delight.
some stones and get those ready because
Yeah.
when she comes home from school today, we're gonna start counting stones on the
All
steps.
right.
So
You go.
thank you.
I'll
Thank
look
you.
forward to hearing how that goes.
I,
Take care.
I will keep you posted. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found one or two meaningful nuggets of information to make your day better. If you think there's value in what we do, please take a moment to tell another friend, family member, or a caregiver. We'd love to hear from you at forourspecialkids@gmail.com. You can send in a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like to learn more about, or if you'd like us to highlight a certain person, please send that information to us. It makes our show so much better and so much more valuable for you. Our Facebook and Instagram handle is For Our Special Kids. And finally, remember to witness the wonder and the wisdom within yourself and others. Until next time.